Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, The ROI of Employer Branding. My name is Nina. I'm an Associate Marketing Manager over here at Glassdoor, and I will be your moderator for the day. So a couple of webinar tips for attendees before we get started. Your audio is streaming over the web, so please make sure that your speakers are turned on and turned up so that you're able to hear all the wonderful content our speakers will be sharing with you all today. All lines will be muted to avoid background noise, but you can ask questions at any time by typing them into the Q&A tab in the lower left corner of your window. To be mindful of everybody's time, we will address all Q&A at the end of the presentation, but throughout everything, if you have a question based on something that one of our speakers said, feel free to submit that whenever you may have it. And for all you social butterflies out there, I'd like to invite you to join the conversation with us socially using the hashtag GDChat, as we will be live tweeting throughout the webinar. Our handle is GD4Employers, that's GD4 Employers, and you will see speaker social handles on the next slide as well. So now I'd like to introduce our amazing speakers for the day. First, we're joined by Megan Likely, who is the Recruiting Program Specialist at Zynga. Hi, Megan. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Nina. Thank you for the introduction. Really happy to be here.
So happy to have you. Next, we have Kirsten Davidson, who is the Senior Partner of Employer Branding at Employera. Hi, Kirsten.
Hi. Nice to be joining again.
So happy to have you as well. And lastly, we're joined by Lisa Holden, who is our Employer's Communication Manager here at Glassdoor. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Nina, and thank you so much for having us today.
Of course, and with that, Lisa, I will pass it over to you and let you take it away for us.
Perfect. Well, again, welcome to everyone on the line. Thanks for joining us. Very quickly, I'll take you through our agenda. Today, we're going to talk about what an employer brand really is and why this matters, and then we'll walk through what it takes to really calculate the ROI of the efforts you're putting toward your employer brand. We'll hear from Megan with an excellent Zynga case study on how this was brought to life there. And we'll finish with some key takeaways, and like Nina mentioned, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So as you have questions, don't be shy about submitting them into the Q&A box. Nina will be managing this the entire time, and then she will distribute questions to us at the end for us to answer live, as many as we can. So don't be shy as you follow along. So let's kick off with, what is an employer brand? This is, we're all on the line today to learn about this, and it doesn't have to be one of these scary buzzwords that no one really understands. Your brand is simply what other people say about you when you're not in the room. And that's a quote from Jeff Bezos, the founder and CEO at Amazon. And this really resonates for us here at Glassdoor and many of the companies that we do business with, because it points to your brand really being your reputation. And your reputation, of course, is made up of things like your culture, your mission and values, and of course your people. And your brand is really defined and driven by your internal employees. They have a very strong voice when it comes to your brand, and I'll give you a couple more examples of that as we go through. And so this needs to be a very crucial part of your overall brand strategy. And when it comes to developing an effective employer brand, that is the foundation of an effective recruitment strategy. And I think all of us can agree that with a powerful reputation comes quality candidates. So the effort isn't in finding those quality candidates and convincing them that you are the company that they should join. The effort comes from cultivating your culture and fostering a very authentic and real and quality employer brand that draws in those candidates. And that's the way to do it in today's social kind of recruiting culture. And of course, with the rise of social media, your message is out there, whether you like it or not. And that doesn't mean don't engage. In fact, that means you must engage. You must have a voice in this conversation that's happening with or without you. So when I talk about what is an employer brand when it comes to culture, it's really important to focus on your people your work environment, your work-life balance, and opportunities for growth and learning. And according to a 2016 Human Capital Trends report by one Josh Burson, culture has become one of the most important business topics of the year. And CEOs and HR leaders now recognize that culture really drives people's behavior, their innovation, and their customer service. And listen to this stat, 82% of leaders believe company culture gives them a competitive advantage when it comes to hiring. But that is so interesting when you look at the converse of that. So despite the fact that 82% of high-ranking individuals say that this is incredibly important for a competitive advantage, 87%, almost the same amount, cite culture and engagement as one of their top challenges. So this is something that's incredibly important and hard to get right. And so that's why we're all here today, right? And one of the reasons that it's hard is that culture is not something that can be understood like a math problem. It's not a matter of increasing work-life balance, decreasing the amount of micromanagement to find that perfect medium. And those aren't levers you can physically play with. It's important to understand that your culture is really fluid, and in order to get a sense of what it is and foster it, you really have to pulse check all the time and check in with your employees, which, by the way, change, and with the fluidity of your workforce comes new elements of your culture and elements that go away. So this is something that you need to really focus on, not just once a quarter, not just once a year, but something that should be part of the way you conduct your business. Mission and values. So this is an important element that goes to your culture. When I think about what a culture is built on, I really think about it as when you define your mission and your values map back to that, that is the map upon which your culture is built. And we know that companies that really have a clearly defined mission see 30% higher levels of innovation and 40% higher levels of retention. And that's because this is something that employees can really get behind. I mean, everyone from the founders to an intern who's a couple months in can understand that you're climbing the same mountain and you're all pointing towards the same goal. And that really makes people feel like part of the organization, which of course boosts culture. And your people, again, I really want to emphasize this, these are your biggest brand asset. They're one of the most powerful voices in your arsenal. And this is interesting, there's actually a study by Edelman, they call it the Trust Barometer, where they found that employees rank among the most trusted influencers when communicating about their company's engagement and integrity. And this, get ready to have your mind blown, employees are 3 times more credible than the CEO when talking about working conditions. So this is a really important data point for you to take back to your leadership team, your CEO, and even your employees themselves to show how important the employee voice is as you're cultivating your brand and, more importantly, communicating your brand. Because people want to hear from those who could potentially be in their shoes, who would be in the same position as them. 3 times more, in fact, than the leader of the organization themselves. And Kirsten, did you want to chime in here on this?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay. I'm moving on. All right, why employer branding matters. So when you think about, so what we've done is basically break down that employer branding is built up of your people, your mission, your values. But how does that actually make a difference when it comes to the success of your organization? So I want to go through these stats because they're pretty remarkable. 250% more likely to rate their overall talent acquisitions efforts as highly effective. And that's from organizations that prioritize their employer brand. So what does that mean? If you're part of a company that says our employer brand matters, therefore our mission, our values, our employees matter, you're going to be better at talent acquisition. 185% are more likely to have at least a high-level talent acquisition strategy in place. So caring about brand translates to caring about recruiting and TA. And 130% are more likely to see increases in employee engagement. And so when you're seeing this, that feels really natural. When you're seeing this from the leadership level, you as an individual worker at the organization say, oh, they're making this a priority, so I feel compelled to make it a priority as well. Companies that do this poorly put all of the pressure on the employees to have a brand voice and be brand advocates, but the leadership team doesn't actually show that this matters to them, and that's where you get a disconnect on your brand. So showcasing that you are a company that cares about brand is enough to boost all of these other factors. All right, strong employer brands lead to more candidates. So this is really interesting. This was a third-party study that was published by some academic researchers in Spain, and the study essentially showed employees, people looking for work, they showed them positive, negative, and neutral reviews about various organizations. And the conclusion was that workers view online reviews by employees as a reliable source of information, and they form opinions and intentions to apply for jobs based on those reviews. So in fact, participants actually said they were more interested to send their resumes to companies after seeing positive reviews. So that's just this same notion put into play, because the reviews that these people are seeing are actually helping them form opinions and changing their decisions about where they would or would not like to work. And this matters again when you think about the importance of a salary discussion. So when they looked at positive, neutral, and negative employer reviews and salary demands, they found that if you're expecting me to work at an organization that doesn't perform well when it comes to culture, you better pay me for it. And so what this study can help you emphasize to your leadership team is that, hey, if we actually focus on culture from the beginning, we're in a much better negotiation position to bring in people who want to work here and aren't putting high demands on things like salary to compensate for the fact that we have a poor culture, which at the end of the day, when you think about it, is simply the right thing to do. So now I'm going to pass over to our lovely Kirsten Davidson at Employera, who's going to give us a rundown on calculating your employer brand ROI.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everyone. So I'm excited to talk about this part because this is a tricky one for people that I see over and over, people talking about what does a dashboard for employer brand look like, what is the most key metric that you have. But the reality is that it's an ecosystem, and it's the measurement of a handful of things all working healthy together to create an overall impact. So with that, if we want to go to the next slide. So here are what I think are the most key elements that need to work together. And really the way I think of it is it starts with your employer brand, which is the attraction piece. And then it moves into how you select and how you're impacting the selection of people to get the right ones in the door, and then all the way through to employee engagement. So then how is the organization able to run in a healthy way, that employees are happy there, you've brought the right people in, and it's figuring out how to measure across that whole thing. The challenge there is, so it's not just about hiring, which is really where I still see a lot of metrics from employer branding come in, but it's figuring out across that whole journey. And what that means in your organization is that you need to be partnering with brand and marketing, HR, and then internal comms to put all that together. And it doesn't really matter where employer brand sits in the organization, I don't think, but what is important is the handshake, is the agreement, and the collaboration across that ecosystem so that you're attracting, selecting, and keeping, and making sure you're measuring all of that at once. Go ahead. So when you look at your employer brand reputation, it's the whole upfront piece, so kind of the traditional brand stuff you're going to look at. What's being said in PR? What kind of articles are you seeing in the media? What's happening on social media? And then being smart about that and reverse engineering it a little bit. You'll have your values, the things that you want to hit on, the things that you know are important to the candidates you're most looking to hire, so getting strategic about that in terms of your channels. But then from a content perspective, building out a content portfolio so it's not you can really evaluate where are you seeing the most stuff, where are you seeing the most pickup on your messaging, and then making sure you're augmenting that and putting more emphasis into other things. So here you want to partner with brand, you want to partner with PR, and really drive the stories where it's not just kind of the table stakes of employer brand, but you're bringing it up a level to really get smart about how you build that reputation. Next slide. Okay, cost per hire. This is not a one-to-one measurement, as probably most of the people on this call realize. So cost per hire is really how do you strategize against different roles. I've seen companies who are starting to weight the different roles, and so assigning them a dollar amount, but also maybe some kind of a point scale, and then spreading those points among recruiters so people have the right bandwidth to bring in the right people, because the more quickly you can get someone through the funnel, as we know, the more money you save. So this one I think is kind of the other side of the coin with time to fill, because the more quickly you bring someone in, the lower the costs are. So again, this really is an ecosystem. And as we look at source per hire, this is really the one that's most important, I think, when you're looking to ask for a budget for next year. When you can identify where you're getting the best candidates from, and it's not just on social. Your channels also include your employee referrals, events that you're doing, maybe on campuses or other recruiting events. Maybe you're getting creative about things, but really knowing where they're coming in from. And that's not just a back-end measurement. It's making sure you're being strategic from the very start and putting in the measurements to track. You can do that pretty easily on social media. People do that with job ads, on Glassdoor. You can put in all the metrics you need so that you can track it all the way through the ATS. But also when you're on campus, when you're at different events, whatever you're doing from a recruiting perspective, that you take some time up front. Think about, all right, how do we track them getting into the funnel? How do we track them all the way through? So, no matter where you sit in the organization, that you're partnering with the folks you need to partner with to put in the tracking up front so that you can then on the back end really identify what sources are working for you, where you need to put more money. When you have that data, it makes the ask that you have to have, the data you have to have when you go and make that ask a lot easier. So now we're going to look at candidate quality. And I think for a lot of organizations, this still is a, let the recruiter know if you like them, how much of a fit where they are, and everyone kind of writes back whether or not they like them or how much of a fit they think they are. The challenge with that, though, is that there's a lot of subjectivity. There's a lot of bias, as we know, that we bring to things not even realizing it. And it's important to take out the subjectivity as much as you can. And that's about creating kind of a science and a discipline around how you interview. So that's developing scorecards. It's having an interview strategy. I worked at a company recently that when they were interviewing, identified on the team who is going to be responsible for what in terms of what they were evaluating and measuring. They worked together with recruiting and best practices to put together a scorecard that people could, from a kind of data-driven way as much as possible, be able to give consistent feedback on the different candidates that they brought in. And that you have to make sure you're training the teams to have this kind of discipline and train them around biases, train them around how to ask questions, and then most importantly, train them on the kind of experience they're trying to deliver. It's not just about process. It's about that high-touch human piece. How are your teams delivering against your employer value proposition and delivering on the expectation that a candidate has when they've come in because they have a certain expectation based on everything they've seen in terms of your reputation. And then on the back end, then you're able to really get the data to determine what the quality is. And when you go back to the recruiter, now you have a historical record where we can really start to identify what is the quality, where is that quality coming from. It's not just as we know, about pushing people through. The other reason I think this one's really important is because you hire a lot fewer people than you interview. You interview a lot fewer people than go into your funnel. So when they get into the interview, what kind of experience you're giving them, et cetera, so they can go out and tell a great story. So on talent pool development, again, I just talked about that how exponentially more people are coming into the top of the funnel. When you think about that, it really becomes a numbers game. For any one person you hire, you know you've interviewed at least 10, so you have then put into the consideration pool maybe 40 or 50 from there, and then there's a whole lot more who've interviewed. And how are you nurturing that talent pool is really important. And a lot of companies aren't very disciplined in doing that. How you create a community, how do you then develop that community, how are you inviting the right people into that community. And one of the reasons that's really important is because while hiring is cyclical, developing a brand is not. And when you tie too much of your efforts solely and your measurement solely to recruiting, what I see happen is that when a company says, hey, we're slowing down recruiting a little bit, and there's lots of reasons that a company would do that, that then they say, we also don't need to put a whole lot of money this year into employer brand. We can kind of pull back on that. But the challenge is that once you lift that hiring freeze or whatever it is, now you're having to kind of go back to the drawing board. And so the more you can bring people in and develop, nurture that, I think the smarter you can be kind of in the long run to bring the right people in. And just kind of on a side note, I'm also seeing this, what I think is kind of alarming trend where, and I actually just saw this today again on LinkedIn, where not just recruiters, but people high up in the organization. There was one I saw this morning, it was a VP who said, if you're going to take the time to pitch me, then you should do your homework. Here's what I want to see from you, and kind of berating somebody for having reached out and maybe having not done all their homework. On one hand, I understand that because you want people to show that they care and they've put in some work, but it would be just as easy for someone who was receiving something like that to say, hey, thanks for your interest. I want to invite you into our talent network where you can get a lot more information and really see if you're a right fit for our company. Because, again, you're delivering an experience that whole way through, and everyone in the organization needs to know how to mobilize against that. That's just my little soapbox for you there. And then next, you look at open positions. And, again, this isn't a one-to-one relationship. This isn't, we have fewer open positions, that means we're doing great, or vice versa. But you want to make sure that the open positions you have, to the extent that you're doing your work kind of across the whole channel and journey, is that you'll see fewer open positions for the ones you don't want open, so the regrettable attrition that you're having. So I think when you look at it in aggregate and you look at it over time, you want to see a better balance of the positions that you have open against the ones that are really challenging or the ones you don't want to have open for all that long, and where that really hurts your organization. So as we look at time to fill, again, I talked about this being the other coin of, or the other side of the coin of cost per hire. A lot of people don't like this one because, again, there's a lot of variables that go into time to fill. There's some positions that should take longer and that naturally take longer because you have to vet more. More people maybe need to weigh in. And so you can't just look at this as one number. But, again, I think in aggregate it tells a story about how well-oiled your machine is. It means that someone came to you because they have a good reputation. It's a company they want to join as they do all their research and look at stuff. Once they came in, they had an experience that they felt like delivered on that. The process that they had to go through was quick, was simple, it was efficient, and all the way through it worked. And they were able to get into the seat faster. So again, I think the more effort you're putting into employer brand and your efforts kind of all along the journey, you start to see a trend where time to fill gets tighter, meaning your operation there gets tighter, and your metrics start to deliver, and you see that line kind of go down. Again, a lot of variables there, but I think in aggregate it's an interesting one to pay attention to. And then as we look at employee engagement, this is that last piece. So where the employer brand work is all about attraction, you move through into HR operations, there's a good handoff, everything's executing as it should. Then employee engagement is really important to track because that's how you keep your great people that you worked so hard to bring in. As you guys probably know, and experiencing, most companies are moving away from these big once-a-year employee engagement studies that by the time you get are kind of out of date. People are moving to pulse surveys. People are relying more and more on Glassdoor to get immediate feedback. This is important not just because you want to measure satisfaction, although that's a really key piece. The reason you want to do that is because you want to know where things are going offline a little bit and where it's falling out. And then you can take that information and feed it all the way back into the beginning into your employer brand. And that can be for things that are working well and things where you're struggling. So if there's a very clear issue in your organization and it's on Glassdoor and people are talking about it on social media, that's not something to be afraid of. It's something to be able to embrace, get some data around, put it back into the organization, develop plans against it to fix it. When you're talking about your employer brand, you might say something like, that you adjust your messaging a little bit, so you adjust the expectation. People know going in what they're in for. And not everyone just wants to join a company with cupcakes and lots of fun and happy hours. People want work that they feel proud of. They're okay going into an organization where they're going to have to work hard and be part of a solution and help fix things. And being able to articulate that, I don't think is something that any of us should be scared of. It's something we should be totally eyes wide open, be able to set expectations clearly so that we can move people through the funnel without them having a disjointed experience, gets them in the door, and everything works together, employer branding, and kind of at its best. So now I'm going to turn it over to Zynga to tell some great stories about the work they've done along this journey.
Hi everyone, this is Megan speaking. So for all of you who might not be familiar with Zynga, just a quick background on who we are. We are a social mobile gaming company, and our mission is to connect the world through games. Our most popular games that most of you probably are familiar with are Words with Friends, Farmville, and Zynga Poker. And a bit of a history lesson, we can go to the next slide here, is that we, back when we first IPO'd, we got the reputation that Zynga was a bit of a grind. It was a really exciting time for us as a company. At the time, back in December 2011, we were the largest IPO since Google. So as you can imagine, it was a booming time here. People were working really long hours and working towards that goal of going public. So since then, since we did IPO, and in the years leading up to when we started really evaluating our employer brand, we had gone through a series of leadership changes, had a few layoffs, and with those leadership changes, there were different perspectives and visions for the company with each leader that came in. So that's sort of where we were before, in the years leading up to 2015, before we started to really take a step back and think about how we can change our reputation a bit and convey to the broader audience who we are from the inside. So jumping to the next slide here, our goal really was to show people what it's like. On the inside, we were very, very proud of the work we were doing, and we all loved working here, but people weren't really seeing that. So we wanted to show people, how great it is to be at Zynga and work for this company. So this was about 2015. We started evaluating, how we can start conveying that to the outside. that we're more stable as a company, that we haven't had any major layoffs in the recent years, and overall we were just a more mature organization. And a lot of things people weren't seeing unless we started conveying it was that we had top-tier perks in Silicon Valley, top-of-the-line benefits program, but our reputation was still suffering from the previous years when we had gone through those leadership restructuring. So we wanted people to see that and with an authentic voice. So how do we do that? And that's where Glassdoor really was a huge asset for us. We wanted to tell an authentic story from the inside out about who we had become and how we matured. So Glassdoor was a tremendous asset for us. We started posting on our Glassdoor page and building out our site there so that it had current photos of the office, photos of our team here and what we were up to recently. So posting on that site regularly and starting to run a few job campaigns really helped us improve our brand. And the way we started looking at this was really with the mindset of, let's dabble in this. Let's give this a shot and see if we have any positive feedback that comes from this. It wasn't like a massive PR push. We didn't partner with marketing or comms or anything initially. It was just, let's take a shot at this. Let's see if we see any good feedback come from this. So it was really, a guerrilla marketing internal push from the recruiting team here. And just a few things that we did, and, really any company could do this too, is we put Glassdoor posters all around the office, in our little kitchenettes and in the hallways, asking our employees to review us. We had the recruiting team put in our email signatures a link to review us on the Glassdoor site so they could be directed there if they had a positive interview experience. Made it really easy and simple right there for the candidate that they could link to the Glassdoor page. And most importantly, what we were doing was we were regularly pushing content. And it was really easy for us because it's a platform that feels natural. It's something that most of us are already using in our daily lives already. It was, similar to like a Facebook platform where you're posting regular updates almost. So we were publishing photos of the office, photos from events that we were going to, articles about the industry and about Zynga in the news. So Glassdoor made it very easy for us to create a voice from the inside out that felt very authentic because it was from our current employees. So next slide here, the results. So ratings went way up, which was very, very exciting for us. We jumped from a 3.0 on Glassdoor to a 3.6, and that jump happened in 9 months. And to reiterate, this is something that, it was just like, let's give it a shot. Let's try this and see if something positive comes out. So we were really excited to see that we made this big of a leap in such a short amount of time. 9 months from a 3.0 to a 3.6, and in 4 months, the first 4 months we got to a 3.4. So it was quick. Glassdoor made it really easy for us to post. And outside of the ratings alone, just anecdotally, we've had such good feedback from our candidates that are coming in. We had, in years prior, we had seen candidates say, oh no, I don't want to work at Zynga. I've heard it was really long hours before the IPO, and that perspective has completely changed. Candidates that are coming in now are saying, I've seen such incredible postings on Glassdoor, and they think, why not? Let's see for myself, that they can come in and see what it's really like here. So thanks to Glassdoor, we've completely revamped our reputation. And it's really improved our employer brand and afforded us the ability to hire the quality candidates that we need. And it was an easy task to do, really. Next slide here. And along that same line, jumping themes a little, but our university recruiting program particularly goes to Glassdoor for postings. We've seen that millennials are going to Glassdoor, and they're, of course, word of mouth too on campus, talking about their experiences interviewing at Zynga and actually coming on site to the internship program. It's where they're going, and they're posting, and people are reading that. So it's been, dramatically good for us to see that people are excited and they're posting really positive reviews. It's really improved our employer brand as a whole. And what's exciting too for us is the feedback from the business with our intern program is better than it has been in the 10 years of Zynga's history. So we're really excited to see that that feedback has been positive as well.
All right, and thank you so much, Megan and Kirsten, for being here today and walking us through this. I want to make sure that we really capture these key takeaways, and Kirsten, I'll pass it to you to go over the first one. Oh, we might have you on mute there. That's all right. I can take it. Go for it.
Okay. So I think consider your ecosystem when calculating your ROI. And real quick, we're getting some questions as I think about this one from some folks on the phone around how do you do that when you're really small and feeling like, some of the stuff is really theoretical, but the reality is, I think, is that the smaller you are and the more you're in a startup phase, the better positioned you are to work with very directly HR and even brand to identify how do you want to track this, what are the things that are most important to your company, and just start there. And you can start to build a foundation on that that's a lot more strategic, I think, and effective than having to be some massive company that has to kind of backtrack and negotiate across organizations to figure that out.
Thank you, Kirsten. That's really helpful. Megan, when we talk about showcasing what it's like on the inside, you want to give us that final key takeaway?
Definitely. So one thing I was talking about in 2015 is when we really decided to put a presence out there for ourselves. So at that same time, we created the alias Life at Zynga. And that was, as it says right there in the name, an authentic voice of what life is at Zynga. So we started really putting a push out to social media sites, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Glassdoor, of course, on LinkedIn, showing what life is at Zynga, putting that hashtag out there, putting photos of the office, putting, employee quotes and feedback out there, just showing real people from the inside out.
Exactly. And I think that really lends itself to our next takeaway, which is to lead with authenticity. So what you're doing is you're in a position to own your employer brand, but you know that it's not made up of simply the elements that you'd like it to be. In other words, you're not the only person talking about it. So the more you can showcase what it's like on the inside and encourage others to share their voice, the more you will lead with authenticity and really embrace both sides of the coin. Every company has pros and cons, and it's important to note them and use the pros in your favor and address the cons in a straightforward and transparent way. And the last takeaway here is to build a Glassdoor strategy. Kirsten, do you want to close us out with this one?
Sure. I'm not on mute, am I?
Nope.
Okay. So when looking at building a Glassdoor strategy, this one can be a little bit scary, but the more you can, I think of it as a communication strategy. So when you look at reviews, for example, a very tactical thing is it's not hard to respond to a review. On the back end, you just go in, type it up, and hit submit, right, and it shows up. The harder part, as many of you know, is who should write it? What kind of messaging should I write? Does legal need to be involved? And people get kind of stuck here. And so, like you would with any communication plan, you can go through and look at your reviews, kind of identify what are some of the themes, put some key messaging against that, work with your internal comms folks or anyone who would need to sign off on it. You can identify who are the different speakers. get their buy-in, make sure they're willing to post, make sure they're logged in a way that they know how to post. And then when you need to respond, even when something's kind of tricky, the team knows how to do it, you can do it effectively. The second is when you have your brand assets, what do you want to lead with on Glassdoor? Remember that with Glassdoor, it's not just candidates who are coming to your page, it's also customers, partners, investors. As we know, there's no longer really a separation between internal, external, what's going on in your organization. So be thoughtful about that and kind of reverse engineer it. You can also think about what are some of the, like in terms of reporting, what are the reporting statistics that your executives or whomever is kind of paying attention need to see? And put together a strategy that everyone can buy off on so it's not just kind of one person in the trenches trying to manage this.
Thank you so much, Kirsten and Megan. For now, we are going to turn it over to questions. Nina, it looks like you're typing away over there. We've got a lot of good ones, so why don't you take it away?
Perfect. Thanks, Lisa, and thank you both, Kirsten and Megan, as well. So as Lisa mentioned, we will now address questions from the audience. So if you have not yet asked a question, please feel free to submit that now. And for those of you that did ask, we will be sending out the copy of the recording and slides within 24 hours. So just be on the lookout for an email from me with that shortly. All right, so the first question we have, Kirsten, I'm going to shoot this one over to you first. The question is, how does employer brand relate to a company's EVP if they do not have one?
If they don't have an employer brand or their EVP?
EVP.
EVP. Well, the first thing I would say is really work to identify what your EVP is. That will help inform and become a lens for identifying or creating an accurate employer brand. So when you're doing that in your employer value proposition, and when you have to develop that, it's not one person in a room. It's working with your executives or any of the stakeholders, number one, to get them on the same page, educate them about what an EVP is, and this can be done in a couple-hour workshop if you're a small company especially. And you present what are the things, where are the areas that you can own, and how do you differentiate? You can take a look at your different competitors. What are they doing? And so you start to identify. You look at your mission, your values. How do you want to communicate that? You want to kind of get in the zone. I see a lot of people start to kind of circle the drain on an EVP project because they start to really wordsmith it to death. But I always say, identify kind of where you want to be, and are you in the zone? Maybe you want to own innovation, diversity. These are kind of some common ones that companies look at. And then once you have that kind of nailed down in a way that people are feeling comfortable with, then you can really kind of create your strategy for employer brand, for internal comms. What is the messaging? Where are the people you need to find? Who are those folks working with talent acquisition, et cetera? So I think it really starts to hone, refine your employer brand because you just know how to map it back. You understand really, truly how to talk about yourselves and how to articulate that in a way that brings in and attracts the right candidates.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question we have, Megan, I'm going to pop this one over to you. The question is, how often do you post updates on Glassdoor? Is it daily, once a week, and do you duplicate the info on Facebook, or is it different content?
Yeah, so as I was mentioning earlier, Glassdoor makes it really, really easy to post just like you would on Facebook. So it's something that most people are familiar with. It's just like a Facebook feed. As to the cadence, we're doing it, a couple updates a week. And the postings that we're getting, they're not necessarily related to Zynga. Oftentimes they are, but it could be industry news. It could be photos of campus events we're doing. It could be photos of life here in the office. Anything that's relevant to what we have going on that week. And we're posting across multiple channels. So it's Glassdoor, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And with that too, what we're doing to really gain traction and gain followers is we are making our employees advocates. We have all our employees here at Zynga looped into the Life at Zynga accounts, so they know to use the Life at Zynga hashtag. They all are followers of each of these accounts, and they're sharing with their own networks. So it makes it authentic and easy for us to get our messaging out. And I think that really any company can use that same strategy of looping in your own employees to broadcast your culture, because they're your biggest advocates, and they're really the ones that are going to bring in referrals and bring in really positive feedback for you as a company.
Awesome, thank you. The next question, I will shoot to Lisa first, but would love both you, Kirsten, and Megan to chime in as well, because we've been getting a lot of questions around this. So there's a couple questions that are saying, what are some recommendations on getting current employees to post reviews if they're reluctant to post since they're currently employed or are in tight-knit groups?
Sure. So I'll take this from the Glassdoor end, and then I'd love the experts to weigh in on how this actually works at companies. But from the Glassdoor end, we want to make this as simple as possible. So all you need is a free employer account to be able to log in to your Glassdoor profile, and you'll be able to do a couple things. One is you'll access company-specific analytics, so you can get a sense of how your brand is performing. But more importantly, you can also click just a couple of buttons to encourage employee feedback. We have a template email already in the Employer Center that very clearly explains what Glassdoor is and why reviews are so valuable to your organization. And you feel free to edit that template so that it aligns with your company's own voice, and simply add in the email aliases as you choose and send it out right from the Glassdoor platform. And it's important to send that out to as many folks in your organization as possible. You don't want to isolate certain groups or certain people and then they feel very put on the spot. You want this to be, hey, we'd like to gather data from everyone. Everyone has a voice. Everyone's voice is important, and we want to hear it. I'll look to either Kirsten or Megan to take it from a more tactical perspective.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You were first.
Okay. Well, quickly here, just a few things that we've done. I mentioned earlier we have the Glassdoor posters that we have hanging around our office, so it's in people's faces and they see it. But more importantly, what direction we've taken at Zynga is to really make everyone a part of the hiring process. It's not something that's just isolated within recruiting or within HR, or even within, the specific hiring team that's hiring at the moment. Everyone here is involved, and they know that. We've sort of made that precedence here. And we've made that known, hey, if you're happy, put that out there. If you like working at Zynga, let people know, so that we're getting good quality candidates and we're getting people that you would want to work with. So I think just being very open and honest with your coworkers, hey, if you're having a great experience here, share that. It doesn't have to be like, anything massive, but just making sure that everyone knows they're involved in the hiring process too, and it's a group effort.
I would add that a good way to do it can also just be to build it into your existing processes. So when someone's been onboarded and they're 90 days in, a lot of companies maybe have a 90-day check-in. In that check-in, at the bottom of the email that invites them to do that, or whatever your process is, it might say, share what your experience has been like with other job seekers. Something as simple as that. Maybe it's at the one-year review. But a lot of companies already have those kind of processes, communications that go out, building it in. A second is making sure that anytime there's an ask, that it's relevant to what's going on, that it's not just kind of this out of the blue, hey, everyone leave a review, but Lisa was saying around education. If there's an education push going on around social media, maybe you want to I don't know, whatever it is, that you just think about how you make it relevant to what's going on. And the third thing I see that can obviously be really, really effective, sometimes it's easier at a smaller company to kind of get this started out right from the beginning, which is engage senior leadership. So from a communication standpoint, so I've seen where a CEO gets up at the all hands and reports on it and says, here's what's going on, here's what I'm seeing, here's what we're going to address. When people know that it's going to make changes in the organization and that somebody's listening, it's much more likely and much more effective to have people share out. And they are a lot more willing to because they think it matters, and it does matter in that organization, and that's really key.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question we have, Kirsten, this one is going to go back towards you. The question is, what are some examples of high-level goals you suggest to have if you're new to the implementation of employer branding?
Well, I would start with the ones that we identified. I'm just trying to think if there's anything beyond that or how to formalize. So, I mean, if you're new to employer brand, there's a lot of good case studies out there about how people have done it, but it is really important that it's tied into your own organization's goals, and that's a little bit different for everyone. So you might have goals around diversity. You might, and maybe not just from a hiring perspective, but also from a retention perspective. So as you're looking at engagement numbers, what are you seeing, and how do you want to affect those? When you're looking at hiring, that would maybe identify what channels you're going to go to. And then you want to identify how effective those channels are. And so it's not always exactly what kind of measurements you're looking for. What the result is hard to get to if you don't know kind of what you're trying to affect at the beginning. So I would get together with internal comms, with HR, with brand maybe, especially if it's a smaller team, and identify and make sure you're starting in at the strategy and the objectives and then building out the measurement tactics from there. If it's a very big organization, you have to kind of start where you are, build your plan, and then identify how you're going to measure against those. So it might be something like Glassdoor, your other channels, some social media, and it might be kind of some basic stuff to start where it's about getting baseline metrics against the kind of basic things you're starting to do. If, for example, if we're going to create content, you track that content. How many people are engaging with that content? That's a great place to just kind of start.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question, Megan, I'm going to pop this one over to you, and it's in relation to kind of how you guys reinvented your employer brand. So the question is, did you wait until the culture shifted to start your employer brand push in 2015, or did your culture shift due to the pushing of your employer brand?
I think really people didn't know what was going on inside here because we weren't putting our voice out to the world. Culture shifted and no one really knew how things were on the inside. There are such fabulous perks going on here, and it really is a family here that we built at Zynga, but no one knew that just because we weren't posting and we didn't have any followers. Our voice just really wasn't being heard. So I'd say the culture was already shifting and there were really positive, exciting things happening here, but we didn't have a voice to that. So I think we were lucky in a lot of ways that we had so many exciting things to say and put out there when we decided, hey, let's start putting this out on social media.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question, Lisa, I'm going to direct this one at you. And the question is, if my company becomes an engaged employer on Glassdoor and our company ratings continue to plummet, what suggestions can you offer?
Yeah, I think this isn't, well, first of all, congrats for taking the steps to be involved in this. I know that it's not always easy to read sometimes negative feedback about your organization. That can feel very personal and it can feel like an attack, and to engage anyway takes a lot of courage, and so I commend you for doing that. The next thing that I would say is engaging employees isn't necessarily enough to shift a culture that's going in a negative direction. The reviews themselves are a reflection of what's actually going on at your organization. And as the person in charge of kind of steering the ship when it comes to culture and brand and reputation, it's your job to take a look at those reviews, see what common themes are bubbling up to the top, which is something that we make very easy in the Glassdoor Employer Center, which you need a free employer account to access, and really make sense of the data that you're receiving. And once you've done that, you can draw conclusions like, it looks like we're having a problem with work-life balance. Our overall satisfaction seems steady. People are satisfied with our senior leadership, but we've identified this problem, for example. And then it's your job to communicate to two major groups. One is, of course, leadership, where you can actually ignite change. Two is the workers themselves. So your entire workforce has, at least some of them, have put forth the effort to share a review on Glassdoor, which is what you're using to draw these conclusions. It's very important for you to communicate the message back to them that you appreciate the feedback and you're doing something with it. And just that action of, we hear you, we've identified the problem, and we want to be transparent about our plans to fix it, can actually shift sentiment pretty drastically before the problem is even fixed, because it shows that you're on it and you care. And that is what employees want to know, because they want to see your company moving in a positive direction. They're working for your organization too. They're part of your culture too. So to see their efforts be turned into action can send a very powerful message.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question, Kirsten, I'm going to direct at you, but Megan would love your thoughts afterwards as well. And the question is more so kind of a statement that they have different leaders in the company who have different ideas of their employer brand and what's important. So what's a good recommendation on how to get everyone on board with the same plan for your brand?
Well, there's not, unfortunately, an easy answer to that. At a lot of companies, it's fragmented, if not a little contentious between different organizations on the employer brand, because different people own different parts of it. It's an education process, and I think people in employer branding are in a really good position to lead that. So you need to find some executive champion who is willing to help bring people together, number one. And part of the conversation and the argument there that you can make is that you have a reputation and a brand around who you are as an employer, whether you want to or not, whether you've identified it and you've been intentional about it or not. So you can gather some data around what that is and put that together as something you can start to socialize. So based on what you're seeing, just basically you can start on Glassdoor with your employees and what's going out there. You can take a look at how many people are coming to your Glassdoor page each month. They're seeing these themes and things come up. The second is you can just do kind of a search on social media and do just sort of a listening exercise to what's being said and what's being pushed out. So you can do kind of just some basic stuff that you can go with data. I find it's very hard to make a convincing argument to executives who are either not aligned or on the same page or just not totally behind Glassdoor for lots of reasons that maybe executives feel like it's going to be threatening, et cetera. But when you can lead with data and you can start to pull that now, and you can put together some of that, you can graph it out and say, hey guys, here's where we're at, and here's where we want to go. We want to develop a clear message. Here are the people we're trying to get in. You can even have some data against some of that hiring stuff. Maybe it's how long it's taking you to fill. What are the jobs that are open that you're having a hard time filling? You can identify what some of the, sentiments for, let's say, engineers or for women are. What are the things you're wanting to hire for? So I think start with data. Be thoughtful about the data that you need to get. Make sure you're leading with data. I can't emphasize that enough when you're working internally and trying to socialize something and educate and bring people together. But I think when people see that, it's hard to turn away from. It's hard to discredit because it's no longer kind of a gut feeling about what they think. But now there's data, and they've all been exposed to it, and then it becomes like, all right, well, how do we work together to solve that? And again, that's where employer branding can really lead the way and offer kind of a framework and a strategy around that to help guide that process.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kirsten. And thank you, Nina, for setting us up today. It looks like we're right at the top of the hour, and I think thank you, everyone, so much for joining.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
On the line, thank you, Kirsten, Megan, and Lisa. And with that, we'll let everyone go. So have a great rest of your day. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.